Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. This is our October equity-based conversation. We are launching this school year series with a super duper heavy hitter, Dr. Angel Acosta. And I am thrilled to have him as our first guest to launch our series this year. Dr. Angel Acosta is a proud first-generation Dominican American who works to bridge the fields of leadership, social justice, and mindfulness. He completed his EDD in the Curriculum and Teaching Department at Teachers College, Columbia University. His research explored healing-centered education as a promising framework for educational leadership development and community care. For close to a decade, Dr. Acosta has served as a program director for the national nonprofit CFES Brilliant Pathways. Angel is currently the director of the Garrison Institute's fellowship program, and he also serves as the creative director at the New York City Healing Collective and is a former trustee for the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. He is a member of the 400 Years of Inequality Project and has an interest in better understanding collective trauma. He is currently collaborating with other scholars to develop group processes for collective healing. Lately, he's become curious about the ways in which technology can be used as a force for advancing racial equity and dismantling structural inequality. You can learn more about him at his website, drangelacosta.com. You can also follow him on IG and see the most adorable pictures of his new son and his beautiful family with his wife. And there's just so much richness that this brother scholar brings to us, and I am just happy he is here with us today. So welcome, Dr. Acosta.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sister Tovi, and really appreciate Sister Tracy as well, and everybody as part of the coalition of schools educating mindfully. I'm arriving today at this hour a little fatigued, but my energy will pick up. Just always kind of part of the practice is to just meet whatever is.
Yes.
And sometimes you're tired, Sometimes you're tired. And so we arrive in that way, and not feeling any shame around that, knowing that I'm in full integrity here, and I'm in right relationship with myself, and that I'm excited to get into the conversation, and deep respect to you for the work that you're moving into the world as well.
Thank you so very much. It was such an honor when I first met you through Maria Tan of the Thriving Teacher Project, and I was offering a mini lesson and being able to speak to healing trauma and how learning this work firsthand for myself as some of the trauma that I'd experienced. And I remember you saying, you know what, I had to stop cooking my tacos. I was getting tears in my tacos as you were cooking dinner while you were listening, just because of the time difference and whatnot. And so I just remember that as a poignant moment, because you chimed in right after that saying, now I know our students are going to make it through this pandemic and the death that they're experiencing from this pandemic. And I thought that was really profound, because we have to remember what our students are going through. Some of the similar things that we've been through, but that they are experiencing deep hardship, and that being healing centered is not just the wave of the future, the move of the future. It's now. That future is now. Yeah. How are you? I ask this for everyone, and connecting it to your work as well. What is your meditation practice like? Because they're individual for everyone, so I like to normalize how they can be different for everyone by having people share, but also how has your own practice supported your work? So one, what is your practice, and then how has it supported your work?
I'll say that I have a variety of practices, some that you might not even call necessarily meditative or mindfulness based. They might be considered more contemplative or just stopping.
Mhm.
I think sometimes when we think about mindfulness or meditation, we get too caught up, like, oh, I have to do a 500 hour teacher certification, or I need to do it right. I need to do it well. I need to empty my mind. Well, no, no, no. I think so. Part of my practice is doing dishes. When I do dishes,
Mhm.
I try to be fully immersed in that process. Sensing into the water, sensing into the dishes, sensing into the whole process of me standing over the kitchen, hearing the noises around in my room, if my son is crying or my wife is in a conversation, just fully immersing myself in that act. Lately, when I put my son to sleep, that's been if I'm successful, that's been a practice of mine. If you want to get traditional, I do have a zazen practice. I have a little zazen bench.
Mhm.
Comes out of the Buddhist tradition. This little bench that you could, kind of like get on your knees and
Mhm.
sit and sit upright and be. So sometimes, maybe like realistically, like once a month, maybe really, I'll do like a zazen meditation for like half an hour, and I'll just sit in that posture. I have that, like that's like my most formal practice, because the pandemic, you know, throughout the year before the pandemic, I would go to different meditation retreats or different retreat centers, and then there, you would receive instruction and you would meditate, and at least throughout the year, I'd go to at least 2 to 3 um, like day long or multi-day long, either silent or just meditation retreats. I did some even in Buddhist monasteries, and I'm not Buddhist. Um, I've walked and sat with monks and have understood the practice, and that's in that tradition.
Yeah.
But any opportunity to slow down, even, and then so there's also relational mindfulness, so just slowing down to kind of sense into this moment here. So when I'm listening to my colleagues, when I'm listening to just life, so that practice for me is there's no distinction between practice or life. There are just moments where there's concentrated practice and intentional practice.
Mhm.
Dancing could be a practice. Any opportunity you have to slow down and tend to your somatic experience, meaning your embodied experience, that is practice. There shouldn't be any shame around it. You don't have to like get it right. You don't have to be in lotus pose and putting mudras up. Like you don't need that. If you want to, if it imbues your practice with meaning,
Right.
go right ahead. Um, Lastly, and that you know you don't have to get so caught up with the spiritual tradition from which a practice comes from, because they've all been distilled in the sense that those practices come from thousands of years of human practice that sometimes get overlaid with religious interpretation,
Mhm.
but that you could enter a practice and have a relationship with it and not necessarily like feel like you're being converted or being. So that's an interesting tension that I think I want to dispel. And then really lastly, that practice is not really about emptying your mind, but it's about restoring a sense of relationship with your mind and your internal chatter.
Whew. Yeah, that was powerful. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm loving what you're naming around not necessarily having to become that one thing. Like you don't have to become Buddhist to practice at a Buddhist monastery. The
Mm-hmm.
practice is the practice. And I remember I struggled with that a little bit when I was first
Mm-hmm.
starting on the path of silent retreats, because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find a silent retreat center that wasn't Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I didn't
Mm.
know that there was this definition, but I just knew that my heart, mind, spirit, soul was calling for silence. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wanted the experience of being in deep silence, and have since done silent retreats at Garrison as well.
Yep.
And so many people don't have the opportunity to participate, thinking that we have to be of the lineage for whatever the practice has come from, or the space that it's located.
Mm-hmm.
And And I know that that's hard too, if we were going to talk about it in the religious framework as well. So I really appreciate you bringing in the fact that it's not that, that this is definitely a practice that is free of religion. It's about being connected to self and restoring the relationship to our minds. I'm with you, because people always think, oh, how do I clear my mind? You're never going to clear your mind. It's never clear. How can we make peace with all the stuff that's needing clarity? And so thank you for naming that.
Maybe it might be helpful to just bring in Reverend Angel Acosta Williams. She really, a big shout outs to her and this organization that she's leading called Mindful, MNDFL. They have a really strong certification program, and they have this one talk that you can purchase. And it's essentially her and her colleague frame what's called mindfulness 3.0, which is like the next wave of mindfulness. And really what they're trying to do is make it more accessible, but that mindfulness is more about the history of attention and awareness. And human communities have always struggled and worked on sustaining their attention and cultivating their attention, and the practices for doing that. So really, that's a beautiful big framing that I think I've really benefited from, is that it's not about like emptying your mind, but rather cultivating your attention. And yeah, so maybe that was helpful.
Thank you so much. Healing-centered practices, healing-centered education. Where do we start? People are here to want to hear more about healing-centered education. How are we adopting the ways of this? How are we cultivating the ways? How are we bringing it into being? Where do people start?
What we want to understand is that healing-centered education is nothing new. Communities have always cultivated practices to restore a sense of order, a sense of wholeness, a sense of well-being in the face of colonization, racism, discrimination, so that there's a long lineage of attempts for recovery and restoration, especially in communities of color, especially in indigenous community, in response to colonial and imperial rule. So part of it is actually starting by reconnecting and turning back to what has your family done to get through travails, to get through challenges? What have your communities gone through, and how have they rebounded from that, or not? There's lesson in both the falling and the bouncing back. But that healing-centered education becomes popular in this particular historical moment because it's a convergence of so much. On the one hand, you have like trauma-sensitive teaching, trauma-informed pedagogy, social emotional learning, mindfulness, culturally relevant teaching, culturally sustaining teaching, culturally responsive teaching, multicultural education, social and emotional learning. I mean, I've mentioned that already. And restorative justice, right? You have these pedagogical approaches that have entered classrooms and the educational arena that all have kind of circulated around each other and have kind of given birth to healing-centered. So essentially, healing-centered education is all of the above and more. It's asset-based, so you focus. You start with you, like, how are you doing? How are you showing up whole to the classroom? How are you showing up whole to your relationships? What's up with you? What do you need to tend to inside of you to show up with a little bit more attention, right? Sometimes we're carrying so many wounds and so many distracting emotional states that we can't even really be present to the teaching that we're doing or the consulting that we're doing. So it's like when our attention is split between our internal state of affairs and the conditions that are at hand before us, whether it's a classroom or a boardroom, there's always going to be discord and there's always going to be a mismatch. And that actually exacerbates trauma and increases lack of well-being. So in terms of where we start with healing-centered education is asking, how are you doing? And what are the conditions that need to be put in place for you to thrive? Um, what are the assets you have? How have you demonstrated resilience? Not just like, oh my God, I'm traumatized by this, that, and the third,
Right.
but rather, I've gone through a lot and I'm still here. So part of beginning is just recognizing your own kind of the work that you need to do to become more whole and uh, more centered, and then also helping others and other practitioners and other teachers kind of engage in that task. And part of healing centered education is the restoration of identity.
Yes.
And that can look in many different ways. That's why like affinity and BIPOC groups are so popular and almost a form of medicine, because it's like, finally I'm like with my people, or because identity becomes a form of medicine, community becomes a form of medicine. But identity can be broader. It's more like, you know, where can you be your full self? Where and when? So healing centered education is about creating the conditions for people, for children, people to thrive. It centers the restoration of identity in the broadest and specific sense. It centers the healing of practitioners, right? So who heals the healer? Who heals the teachers? Who heals the healthcare practitioners? Um, and lastly, this is kind of part of healing centered education that doesn't get talked about enough. It's slightly political, because for you to really engage in healing centered work, you have to be very clear about the very structures that cause the harm in the first place. So that's a very important distinction between healing centered education and holistic education. Sure, thank you, Montessori. Thank you, Waldorf. Thank you, all those beautiful holistic education um, pedagogical approaches that have emerged over the last 100 years. They do a great job at combining mind, heart, and body, and learning by doing, but they leave out the political. So who ends up benefiting from those pedagogical approaches really is people who can afford them and who can pay $15,000 a year to send a kid to the. That's wonderful if you can do it, but healing centered education is a little bit more broad, more historically grounded, socially just, politically inclined, and that in this particular historical moment where there's so many crises, it's it's language that we need. And as much as I consider myself a healing centered educator, I'm not married to the concept, because at the end of the day, it's not even about being healing centered. It's about creating conditions for people to be whole. Yeah. So there will be another concept, and it will come, and it'll be equally as sexy or more, and we'll take it. We'll take another wave. But for now, this is the one that has the most momentum for me.
Love it. Love it. And I know what you're naming too, in terms of, because even in the last year, I've seen you shift a bit in language, even. So it is emerging as we grow and as we learn. And what's powerful is that when you say it's not new, how that lands for me is that it's like being activated as a remembering. Even. And that's part of the emerging. Like the more we can remember the power of what this body of work is lending itself to, it's part of the healing that's causing the healing to remember that we're making this healing centered. That's making sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's powerful.
Well, can you share with us your mini lesson or whatever journey you're going to take us on? Okay.
Yeah. Part of my the invitation to join you all tonight was just to give a little mini lecture and a little kind of a mini talk. So maybe we can do a little practice, if that's okay with everybody. Absolutely. Here. Feel free to take your video off if you'd like, and then just take a moment to just acknowledge just what's coming up for you right now in whatever way. It's maybe a little late for some of us on the East Coast, a little earlier for those on the West Coast. Those of us who are international, just acknowledge how your body is carrying this moment. And if you want to, as a choice, feel free to close your eyes. Feel free to gently close your eyes if that's supportive. You want to keep your eyes open, keep them open. If this is the first time you're meditating, just acknowledge this is the first time you're meditating and sit with the maybe the anxiety or discomfort of trying to slow down for a moment. The practice is fairly simple. All I'm asking you to do is to give yourself permission to just stop. Set your phone aside, pull back from the keyboard, pull back from the multiple tabs that are open, pull back from the email, pull back from your phone. Just a couple minutes. You may even sense a little bit of anxiety creeping up as you try to pull back and actually give yourself some time to rest. All we're trying to do here is stop to see if we can allow and welcome a little ease, this natural ease that can emerge when you take ownership of how we're showing up in the present moment. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe as you're settling into your breath and settling into this moment, you have a thought, and the thought is pulling your attention. That's okay. You can acknowledge that sensation, that you can acknowledge that thought, almost be drawn by it, taken by it. And then your next exhale, just bring your entire attention right back to your chest. Bring your attention right to the tip of your nose. Bring your attention to your inhale. Maybe it happens again. Another thought. Maybe it happens again. The same thought. Practice is the same. Bring your attention right back to your body. And sometimes that's the practice. Just continuously taking ownership of your attention. Bringing your focus right into your body. See if you can sense in that precious air coming into your nose, down your diaphragm, filling your belly up. Slowly exhaling, feeling your feet. If they're touching the ground, you can sense that subtle relationship to the floor, that profound relationship to the earth. Always there, grounded, supporting us. Just one more minute. I'll stay silent for just a few seconds to see what happens when you're silent. Sometimes the goal is to sit in practice, to sit in silence like this, and maybe it's just to witness all the stuff that's inside of us, but to do it in a way that creates space between the thoughts and the feelings that are emerging and our response to them, using the silence to create more and more and more space between the thoughts and your response and attachment to the thoughts. That's it all. That's all. Using the breath to expand that space between the thoughts and our response to the thoughts. And just maybe after breathing for long enough, after being silent for long enough, maybe those thoughts that keep coming up, maybe they won't be as disturbing. Maybe they can just be gentle reminders as opposed to intense sensations. So taking these last 30 seconds to take some deep breaths at your own pace, at your own time. Taking one more gentle, deep breath. And as you exhale, feel free to just slowly open your eyes and close your practice in whatever way makes sense for you. Come back to this space, turn your video back on if you'd like, or just join us back into this space. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of talk a little bit about what just happened there from a neuroscience perspective. So what you want to know is that when we engage in a practice like that, we end up activating what's called the parasympathetic system. Sister Tovi talks a lot about this in her presentations. And it's very important that you understand that because it reinforces the agency and power that we have. So for example, because of the pandemic and because of, especially for those of us who are educators, maybe some of you are teaching in schools or hybrid or online, regardless, it's probably one of the hardest moments for in the history of education since probably the last pandemic, give or take, thinking about the Great Depression, and other, intense moments. So what was important to understand is that our sympathetic system is actually overactive. So our sympathetic system is the other part of our nervous system that is in charge of what some people might call the flee or fight or freeze response. And that part of our nervous system and really part of our brain is governed by an older part of our brain, which some folks call the reptilian brain. It's back here, the cerebellum, the amygdala, fancy words for the physiology of the brain. And just to understand, that's where like a lot of our emotions are processed, and a lot of that's like the older part of our brain. And it really, that part of our brain adapted to very brutish conditions. The savannah, constantly be attacked, trying to survive inclement weather, predators all over the place. So that hundreds of thousands of years of wiring is still with us. So like when you feel threatened, when you feel whether it's real or perceived, that part of our system kind of activates. Like, you either freeze, response, or flee. Even in our most interpersonal relationships, like when I have an intense argument with my wife or anybody in my family, I kind of tend to shut down. Like I disassociate, I flee, I want to leave. So we have those kind of responses all the time. But it's important to know that during the pandemic, that part of our system is on overdrive. For example, before I go out of my house, I have to make all kinds of decisions around my safety. Is my mask on? Yes. Do I have my hand sanitizer? Yes. Do I have my wipes? Yes. All right. All of those decisions based around trying to protect myself from a disease that is still out, the virus that is still out there, whether you believe it or not, it's still out there and it's still taking lives. So in public, we're on edge. And So if you're feeling yourself being more irritable lately, or edgy, or kind of impulsive a little bit, it's partly because our sympathetic system is on overdrive. So what's important to note is that the practice we did today, if you surrender to it, right? If you try, even if you struggle while doing it, oh my God, Angel's asking me to do this meditation. Even if you struggle with it, but you do it, what we did there, we inhaled, right? We inhaled, and we did it for a prolonged period of time. Intentional breathing, whether it's deep breathing or shallow. There's all kinds of breathing practices. You can Google them. What we did was we activated the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve going from the back of the brainstem down the spinal cord, sometimes even wrapping itself around the vital organs. And that nerve, the vagus nerve, activates the parasympathetic system, which activates our feelings of ease and regulates the sympathetic system, which puts in check our edginess, our impulsiveness. Like, relax. So that mindfulness practices and contemplative practice, or any practice you do to slow down, has a direct neurochemical and a physiological response that actually allows you to take a little more control over your body, and then you can deploy it at any point. Any point. Let's say you're actually going through a crisis in the moment. You're in a classroom and a kid's being disruptive, or like something's happening. Boom. Okay, that's where you powerful space to practice. Create space between what's happening and my reaction to what's happening. Give yourself the breath. Give yourself a sense of ownership in response to what's emerging. And then with enough practice, and not that you need to be a master, but with enough practice, you get to the point where, so for example, a lot of us might fear public speaking, right? So what happens when we engage in public speaking? So we're in a presentation, whether it's Zoom or in person, and people are looking at us, and all of a sudden, all these other thoughts: you don't belong here. Who do you think you are? You went to this school. You didn't go to this. You didn't finish this. You failed that. All these thoughts are rushing you, and you're giving a presentation about whatever. Is that even connected to the internal chatter? But with enough practice, those voices have no power over you. Those voices can exist. Like, I could have all kinds of voices right now telling me all kinds of things around, whether I'm worthy enough to be even listened to in this moment. But with practice, the emotional charge of those words reduces, and then you're able to be more present. So that's kind of like a little bit of the science behind the power of meditation and contemplative practice. And based on some research, 8 weeks, just 8 weeks of 10 minutes a day is enough to like literally rewire your brain and create what's called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to grow and make new, what's called neurosynaptic connections. Very fancy term for new ways of understanding and being in the world, and even experiencing awe, like a sense of awe. And that's something to end on. That even in how crazy the times are, I tend to sometimes, at least once a week, I'm like, wow. And I think it's partly because of just practice, the many practice that I deploy throughout the week, whether it be doing dishes or trying to put my son to bed, and not getting too frustrated with it with him and myself. So just a little bit of a kind of a sciencey lecture there. And the last thing I'll say is that we're having a big summit, the Healing Centered Education Summit, starting on Thursday, right through the weekend. And then I'm gonna put the link to the chat. I'm gonna put the link to the summit in the chat. You can always go to drangelacosta.com and check out summit. So feel free to join us. Uh, and then I also want to gift you all access to it was called a audio garden. So we ended up interviewing almost 30 people and doing all kinds of practices. And we built out this audio garden with interviews and practices for people who want to give you access to part of the audio garden for free. So I just wanted to be generous with my little teaching there, um, and I'll just stop there so that Toby can maybe ask any additional questions, and I'm sure I can kind of talk more a little bit about healing centered education and that, but that's all, folks. It's just becoming more aware of the already existing infrastructure you have of a body that has millions of years of wisdom in it already. That really there's more. It's been a grand forgetting of the innate power that we have to be present and to take care of ourselves, and so that this moment is really more a return to self, to each other, to relate, to the importance of relationships, stuff that we already know. So sure, the crises are before us, and they are big, they are quite wicked, um, but we just need to slow down a little bit, and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that practice and the lesson associated with it. I know I'm even more relaxed. I came in pretty relaxed too, and I'm like feeling even more relaxed. And I'm curious, I want to open up the floor. We have people here in the space with us. We also have people on Facebook Live. And what questions have arisen from any of us, or anything that's resonating that we want to share back with Dr. Acosta? But please feel free to bring your voice into the space if you have a question or some sharing that you'd like to offer into the space. You're welcome to do that. I'm thrilled that one of my best friends from like elementary school back in the day, Amira, is here and has also joined COSEM, and we haven't seen each other in over 30 years, and she's here, and Maria's here, and Hector's here, and so many folks that we are familiar with. So it's good to have everyone here. But any questions? I think you've relaxed us all too, and just given us so much to reflect on. See. Amira, you're muted.
Sorry. Hi. I know this is mostly for teachers, but I really wanted to join because I've been very interested in the subject in general. For myself, it's a lot of life experiences that have happened to me in the last few years that have, you need to get, I can't get myself to get out of this constant thinking and not relaxing, because even when I relax, I feel like my mind is going. I know that this is mostly for teachers, but I think that it's something that everyone can use on their everyday life. But I just can't get myself to, other than this few minutes that we had our eyes closed, to stop thinking about all the things that just run through my head constantly of what I have to do next. And I just can't live in that moment. I don't know how to get there or start from there, even though I'm an extremely spiritual person. And so it's hard for me to get in that mode, other than, I'm like, I have a 3:30 Zoom, and so I knew that my attention was going to be here. But I feel like if I'm just doing this in my room, I don't think that I'm going to be able to focus. So I don't know where to begin with that.
Yeah. Sending you so much energy, Amira, and part of, I think, for you, and for many folks who like us, and I say you, I say us because I'm in a similar place. That part of where to start is to continuously acknowledge that, like just continuously acknowledge that, right? Like, so I have all this mental chatter, it's connected to particular experiences, it intensifies at particular moments. It intensifies in this particular way. So, because on the one hand, you can let the process just naturally unfold, and it'll do what it'll do what it does, right? It'll have you, getting to meetings on time. It'll have you overthinking. It'll have you just being really intensely focused on just responding and reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing you could do is just kind of shift your relationship to it a little bit, and actually like leaning into, okay, so, and just seeing if you can find any differences, even if it's subtle, like, ooh, I noticed that I get a little bit more intensely anxious during this conversation or at this time of the day, or, it's really hard for me to really slow down, especially at this time. That's a very proactive step for you, because you don't have to do anything beyond just pay more attention to yourself.
Well, here's my thing. So I sometimes, because I live with my parents and they're elderly and I take care of them. So 90% of my stress and anxiety is them. So I feel, and they're very needy. So my dad's constantly like, he's already texted me 20 times from downstairs. So that part of that is what gets me anxious. So do I need to separate myself physically from this? Like, do I need to go outside and do this? Because when I'm home, like even right now, like the 20 texts that I told him, I'm going to be on an hour Zoom upstairs because I work from home. And I've already gone, he's old and it doesn't. So even if I try to do it, do I need to physically be in a different place to be able to do that? Or can I be able to do that in the space that I'm in?
Yeah, you can do it in the space that you're in. Ideally, I mean, of course, you would want to like create space beyond the space that you're in, so you can kind of not be as distracted, right? But
it's not possible.
Even the most like a lot, like look at like folks like Thich Nhat Hanh, some of the most profound teachers of our lifetime. He became a Buddhist meditation teacher and monk during the Vietnam War. So think about it. You're practicing, and there are bombs being dropped above you. So, and then part of that tradition, from that tradition comes engaged Buddhism. As opposed to just staying in the monasteries, they actually went into the communities and started to support. So my advice to you, if any, you probably have a little bit more choice than you think in terms of responding to the stress and to the intensity of whether it's your father's need or whatever it is, that even the consistent attention that's being pulled, right? At some point, you can create enough distance, not detached as if like you're cold, but with practice, you can create enough distance where the anxiety that can come from his needs still create enough space for you to take care of yourself. So it's almost like, as opposed to a question of like, where do you start and what practice you need, I would invite you to think about redefining boundaries, even as you're in a boundary, right? It's almost like you're closed off, and like, what do you do? And I'll just leave you with this quote from this colleague, Prentice Hemphill, on boundaries, and she says that a boundary is the distance within which I can love myself and love you too at the same time. So like, and then hold that boundary, right? And you're doing it, right? So relax, Dad, like chill. And then it's just holding it, always holding it, holding it. I can't promise you'll achieve like nirvana or some kind of peace, but that the practice of holding that boundary with your dad specifically will be the practice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sending you energy for that.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add, if I can, because Angel and I know we teach in different arenas, but we're supporting a lot of folks in healing centered work. Like, so many of the adults are now coming with questions that are often for them and not necessarily for students right now, because everybody is doing the work right now of trying to be whole, to stay whole, and to show up as our best selves. And the boundary conversation. I love what Angel shared. And I want to also add, a lot of times people can be challenged with boundaries because we think it's this an aggressive piece where we have to take almost a defensive posture, like stay back, stay out. It's a force, if you will. And there's a way to reframe that in terms of a boundary is not about keeping people out, back, or away. A boundary can also be about holding what is sacred close to you. Mm-hmm. Holding what is sacred close to you. So it's that energetic of a holding energy instead of that forcing out. And so sometimes that helps for folks who have a hard time offering a boundary. So I just want to offer that, Amira. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
So, any other questions or anything that people want to bring into the space before we start to close? Dr. Acosta, would you share with us a little bit as we start to close? What can people expect from attending this inaugural Healing Centered Education Summit?
Oh, just a variety of voices that are entering. Just a variety of voices that are within the Healing Centered and Restorative Paradigm. So, people from, all kinds of different realms of education, higher education, K through 12, hip hop scholars, like how is hip hop a form of medicine, art, social justice. So just a variety of different voices that are trying to uplift this idea of healing centered. And that if you're available, there'll be a lot of receptions and networking receptions. So those of you who are isolated, come and join us. We're going to have a lot of like little networking parties, and that'll be fun. And those of you who want to engage in dialogue, there'll be a lot of conversations online with a digital platform that has been built through Mighty Networks and Marco Polo channels. So just a community, just a robust community, and kind of fun. And also, you can do it at your own pace. You don't have to come to everything. You can just be gentle with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We really, really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule, out of fathering time and husbanding time in the evening to be with us and our Facebook family, to really grace us with healing centeredness and also the consciousness that it takes to embody this work. So thank you for sharing that with us. And we wish you nothing but great success at this inaugural summit. And we know that there'll be more to come. And so can't wait to get even more of the teaching and the audio garden resource and just everything. So thank you so much for that. And we also want to share with you all to save the date for Educating Mindfully Conference, MCON 2022 is happening February 3rd through 5th. It will be in Illinois, but there's information on our website for that. Our next equity conversation is happening in January with Meena Srinivasan, and she's going to grace us with talk from her book and the work that she's up to now as well, as we're making this bridge with SEL and mindfulness and equity and healing centered and trauma responsiveness, all the goodness. We're bringing it all to you. If you love COSEM and what we're up to, we invite you to be connected and involved however you can, starting with yourself by just simply committing to the 1%. So 10 minutes of your day, spending it in practice. Supporting the book, absolutely. The book is a field guide. And you can also start a COSEM chapter or practice group. And of course, we invite you to donate regularly and generously. And generously is completely up to your interpretation. Every bit helps as a nonprofit. So we really, really thank you for your support however you can. I am the board president. I would be remiss if I did not ask for donations for our nonprofit. So I make it part of my work. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And a special shout out to you, Angel. Thank you so much.
You all take good care. You all take good care. Take care.